Dreams do not have a filter that your normal, polite, waking self puts up.
Welcome to the hidden meaning of dreams with Sweet Georgia Pam.
It does matter what the dreamer themselves associates with those things that come up in the dream.
Spiritual director, dream expert, author, and educator, Sweet Georgia Pam is here to remind us that dreams are the answer. They're always with you. They know you better than you know yourself, and they're always trying to tell you the truth.
There's some back and forth here between you and some awareness.
And now your host, Melissa Carter.
Sweet Georgia Pam. That is her website where you can find everything out about Pam, Sweet Georgia Pam. She's on social media as Sweet Georgia Pam. How are you, Pam? Pam.
I'm doing okay.
I really do like your website. I mean, Pam and I are friends, and I've been to this website many times over the years, but I really love the organization. I love that there's so much because we talk about being creative people off air, and sometimes creative people have splayed, like I'm the worst about having everything splayed in all different places, where Pam has everything just concisely right there.
I try not to touch it for that reason.
But you want to.
If I go back and look, I'm like, oh, I should change this. Oh, maybe a whole new color would be good. And so I've kind of learned to just don't go back and visit the website unless you need to.
I've seen interviews with musicians before about their songs, and the same thing, where a lot of really infamous songs that we listen to, the artist is like, I just had to record it. They're like, I still listen to it and think, oh, I should have done this. It should have changed to this. So they were mentioning how the creative process doesn't have a point where it's exactly perfect and you're like, oh, this is great. It's at some point in your creative process, you have to just pull the trigger, right?
Yes.
Anyway, sweetgeorgiapam.com is the website. So today I wanted to talk about an article I found, and I don't know whether it's because I would notice this article anyway, or whether it's because we do this podcast, but it was in Good Housekeeping, which I do subscribe to because I got a special, and my mother used to read this magazine, so it has some recipes in it and stuff. In Good Housekeeping, they had a whole article in the March issue about dreams. It was like a 2-page spread, and I was like, oh, this is great. But it was specifically about stressful dreams. And it was talking about how, because of the pandemic, because of the isolation a lot of people have been feeling, that their dreams are starting to likely reflect what they've been through. And so it was basically saying, look, don't be freaked out if you have these dreams or nightmares that are happening, because it may be a reflection of what you have been feeling here these past few years. So I was hoping maybe you could comment on that, and how dreams, again, we try to specify, are there to help you.
Yeah.
And your body's talking to you in ways you may not be paying attention to.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, kudos to Good Housekeeping for doing a 2-page spread on dreams, because I think that's a good idea. I think dreams should be a topic of the conversation, especially when it comes to mental and emotional well-being. It's right up there at the top of the list. So hooray for them. For me, the fact that stressful dreams might be surfacing right now in reaction to the last 3 years of our lives is a sign of progress, is a sign of a movement towards that stressful event has happened and I have survived it long enough so that now I've returned to some sense of normalcy or rhythm or a little bit of stability after there's a little bit of transition time from that particular type of trauma experience. That's when the dreams will surface. Once you're through it and the door has sort of closed for the most part on that experience, then your unconscious mind can start letting some of the unnecessary stuff that you were hanging on to. You don't have to hang on to it now. So it might surface as a stressful dream now, as a reflection for the things that we have collectively been through.
Well, I thought, I guess when all this started, that there was a definite beginning point that we can all look back on now, whether that was the beginning of this virus. A lot of people, there's a debate, but for us in America, March 13th of 2020 is when we were told to shut it down and to go home.
Yeah.
The fact that we have recently celebrated, for lack of a better term, the 3-year anniversary of that date. So I guess for me, I thought, well, there was a hard beginning for a lot of us, so there'll be
That's
a hard
great
end.
point.
Right. So unfortunately, politics and, kind of got in the way. And I think that fractured a lot of people. But I don't even know if naturally there would have been a hard end to the pandemic where people are like, oh, okay, we announced this, we do this. It's more of been a subtle, okay, well, you could wear your mask, you couldn't wear your mask, you can go out, we don't have any direction anymore on it. And so I could see where there's a confusion for a lot of people. And if they're having these dreams, that for them, that door is closing, right? So that they may be experiencing this, where for others, it may not be that yet. I don't know.
Well, and you also bring up a really, really good point, which is the idea of an anniversary. The body and the unconscious mind, dreams especially, have this really incredible capacity to mark time. So I wonder about Good Housekeeping if they recognized March being the time as an anniversary for an opportunity to talk about where we've come in the last 3 years or what we've been through in the last 3 years. But your dreams have this really weird capacity to mark an anniversary without you consciously being aware of it. So if you're experiencing stress dreams, and if the symbolism seems related to catastrophe or the foundation underneath you changing or shifting and kind of becoming everything, the foundation of a house becoming unstable or something like that. Those are kind of foundational dreams about your life shifting on its axis.
Yeah.
Those might be marking, like you were saying, an anniversary of the start of COVID. That regardless of whether you recognize that there was a clean end or a clear end to it or not, the start of it, you made an excellent point, was very clear.
Yeah.
And things were very abrupt. And so what happened in for me, I'm sure for lots of us, what happened with that abrupt change is that things became real really quickly.
Yeah.
So it was like, oh, wait a minute. Now I suddenly have to think about death on a very real level when I didn't have to necessarily before, because it wasn't right in front of my face. So that abrupt change started, like you were saying, 3 years ago. And so that's the anniversary. It's not necessarily about having a clean end to it, because it's certainly, you're right, it's a very messy situation.
And if you don't have stress dreams now, but you might, my thought too is it was a very hard beginning, meaning a hard start. And like you said, you had to think about death on a level that you hadn't had to think about it before. And then there was all this unraveling of belief systems, because we all thought, oh, well, gosh, we'll be done with this by summer, good.
Yes.
We'll be done with this by fall.
I forgot about that.
And so there was these layers of, wait a second, I expected this to happen and it didn't happen. I expected this to happen and it didn't happen. And then for people like me who have health issues where I needed people to be supportive and everybody to be on the same page and to have clear direction, because as a transplant recipient, that's been my experience, is I have clear direction from my doctor. So if you do this, you'll be okay. If you do this, we'll be okay. This following the rules. And so for me, it was difficult to see this shift of disagreement, right? And not to get political, but from my personal emotional state, it was, I don't like us not getting along right now. I need us to get along. I need to know what to do. It also was this idea that you had these expectations and they weren't fulfilled. And that brings a level of stress too.
This is bringing up so many different thoughts, but I guess to stick to the topic, which is when you're having stress dreams, and maybe they're a reflection of starting to process all of the changes that we have experienced in the last 3 years, or that you, the dreamer, specifically have experienced in the last 3 years. The best piece of advice I can come up with in order to respond to that, like if that's happening, or if it starts to happen or whatever, is to tell your stories, because everybody had and that was the other thing too. Like, we suddenly were completely alone. Like, my experience was completely different than even my husband's experience. And we live in the same house, and we had the same challenges that we were going through together. You know, my experience of hearing the news, of being on lockdown, of trying to adjust to Zoom as a new normal way to get out of the house was completely different than your experience, right? Mm-hmm. So our dreams are going to be totally tailored and dialed into what were my emotional experiences, what were my stressors, as opposed to what were we collectively experiencing. So they're going to be dialed in very, very specifically and tailored. My dreams tailored to me and my stories and the things that were scary for me. And so the way to counter that is to tell the stories, make space in your day to tell the stories. Where were you when you learned about the lockdown that we were all going to go into? What did that feel like for you? What do you remember about those experiences? What was the hardest thing about the first 6 months? Like, those kinds of stories can help you start talking through the things that your dreams are also trying to process. Mm-hmm. And it will make those stressful dreams a lot less stressful for you.
That's why we talk to go to sweetgeorgiapam.com, because you can work with Pam one-on-one. You can sign up for that at sweetgeorgiapam.com. Also, if you're someone who has a hard time recalling your dreams, but you think it would probably be in your best benefit to try to start remembering your dreams, she's got a free guide there called 6 Nights to Better Dream Recall that you can access as well. And she's great on social media. She's got all kinds of stuff that happens there. So Sweet Georgia Pam is where you can find her there, and you can DM her there as well. And if you're willing, we would love to have your dream here on the show, and Pam can unwrap it for us all together. We invite you to do that as well. So Pam, as always, thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Take care, everybody. Sweet dreams.
The content in this podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Pam Muller is not a licensed mental health professional. If you or someone you know suffers from severe, persistent nightmares, please seek medical help.